Good afternoon. These notes are on multiplying and dividing fractions. This should be on page 24 of your notebook. So let's go ahead and get started. On the inside, we're going to have notes on multiplying fractions, and we're also going to have notes on dividing fractions. So let's start with our multiplying. So here are some steps with multiplying fractions. You do not need a common denominator. All you're going to do is multiply the numerators together, multiply the denominators together, and then you just simply simplify. So let's go over here and practice some. So 1 times 3 is 3, 3 times 5 is 15, and 3/15 can be simplified because they both have a factor of 3, and this results in a 1/5. The second example is 3/8 times 2/9, so 3 times 2 is 6, 8 times 9 is 72, 6 and 72 both have a factor of 6 in common, so I'm going to divide them both by 6/6, which equals 1/12. So that's one way to do it. The next way that you could do it is, instead of multiplying and then simplifying, is you can actually simplify before you multiply. So what you want to do is you want to look for factors in the numerator numbers and factors in the denominator numbers and see if you have anything in common. So if we look here, we've got a 2, a 5 in the numerator, and then a 15 and a 6 in the denominator. I see that 2 and 6 have a factor of 2 in common, so I'm going to divide them both by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3. Then I also see that 5 and 15 have a factor in common of 5. So I'm going to divide by 5 and get 1. I'm going to divide by 5 and get 3. Now I've simplified my fractions to be 1/3 times 1/3, and that gives me 1/9. All right, the second example, I'm going to look for factors that are in both the numerator and the denominator. I see that both 7 and 21 have a factor of 7, so let me divide by 7 and get 1. Divide by 7, I get 3. And then I also see that 6 and 9 have a factor of 3 in common, so I'm going to divide by 3 and get 2, and divide by 3 and get 3. Now I'm going to use my multiplication rules, which is multiply my numerators together. This gives me 1 times 2 is 2, and then 3 times 3 is 9. So 2/9 is my answer for that. What if we're dealing with mixed numbers? So what you're going to want to do is convert your mixed number to an improper fraction. Then you multiply your numerators together, denominators together, and simplify. Or you can simplify before you multiply. So for example, right here, 1 and 1/5, I can change that to 6/5 times 2/3. I notice that 6 and 3 have a factor of 3 in common, so I'm going to take out that factor of 3 and make that a 2, take out a factor of 3 and make that a 1, and then that leaves me with 4/5. This example says 3/4 times 2 and 1/3. I'm going to convert this 2 and 1/3 to an improper fraction. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So now I have 3/4 times 7/3. I'm going to see if I have any factors in common. I do. I have a 3 in the numerator and a 3 in the denominator, so I'm going to take out a 3 and make that a 1, take out a 3 and make that a 1, and now I'm left with 7/4. Well, 7/4 is improper, so let's change that to a mixed number, and that leaves me with 1 and 3/4. All right. What if we're multiplying a fraction by a whole number? So what you're going to want to do is change the whole number to a fraction with a denominator of 1, and then you multiply like normal. So when we have 5 times 1/8, really we can write this as 5/1 times 1/8. I don't see any factors I can take out except for 1, and that doesn't change it at all. So this is 5 times 1, which is 5, and then 1 times 8, which is 8, and that leaves me with 5/8. 2/3 times 6, well, I'm going to change that to 2/3 times 6/1. Well, I see a factor of 3 with my 6 and 3, so I'm going to take that factor of 3 out. And that leaves me with 2 times 2 in the numerator and 1 times 1 in the denominator, which is 4/1, which that is just 4 wholes. So down here at the bottom, I want you to go ahead and practice those 3 questions. Now we're moving on to division. Division, we're going to model it first, and then we're going to try to notice a pattern. So 1/2 divided by 1/4. So what I've done here is I've taken a whole and I've cut it in half. So this is my 1/2. I'm going to shade it in. And then I want to represent 1/4. So I'm going to use a different color. So the fours tell me how many pieces I want. So 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. And I only want one of those. So what I do is I look at what is shaded in common. It's 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. So then, well, actually, hold on one second. I'm gonna pause this. Okay, So I redrawn the picture because I was confusing my division with my multiplication. So here's my 1/2, and then division of 1/4 means how many 1/4 fit into this 1/2. So I'm actually going to redraw another hole, and I'm going to see how many fourths fit into that one hole. And if you look here, there's 1, 2, so 2 1/4 fit into 1/2. So the answer would be 2. All right, here if we're looking at 1/5, so if I draw my picture, so there's my 1/5. I want to know how many 1/10 fit into 1/5. So if I made another hole and I broke them up into tenths, so 1, 2, so 2 tenths fits into 1/5. All right, and then 1/6 divided by 1/3. Okay, and then 1/6 is right here. And then how many 1/3 fit into 1/6? Well, this one's a little different. So here's, well, it looks like only half of 1/3 fits into 1/6. So 1/2 of a third fits into 1/6. So your answer is 1/2. So do we notice any patterns in solving these? If so, what? Well, what we can notice is that you actually could multiply by the reciprocal. Okay. So how do we divide fractions? You actually don't need a common denominator. You're going to keep the first fraction the same, and then you're going to find the reciprocal of the second fraction, and then you're going to multiply those two fractions together. So a quick little thing is just multiply by the reciprocal. So what is a reciprocal? A reciprocal is when you switch the numerator and denominator, or another word you might hear is flip. So 2/9, the reciprocal would be 9/2. 1/6, the reciprocal would be 6 wholes. 15 would be 1/15. And 2 5/8, we have to change that to an improper fraction first. So that's 21/8, and then we do the reciprocal, which is 8/21. All right, so right here, 5/12 divided by 5/6. I'm actually going to tell you don't need to multiply by the reciprocal for this one because you can actually just divide across. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 6 divided by, or 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay, you get 1/2. Well, we can prove that it's the same answer if we multiply by the reciprocal. So 5/12 times 6/5, and then I can take out a factor of 5 and get 1, take out a factor of 6 and get 1 and 2, and that gives me 1 times 1, which is 1, and 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, 4/9 divided by 2/3. Again, this one's kind of easy because you can actually divide across. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then if you want to check it by multiplying by the reciprocal, you can. All right, this one is going to be a little harder because you can't just divide across because 11 divided by 7 does not give you a nice whole number. So let's go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal. So let's multiply times 7/2. Take out a factor of 2, and you get 4 and 1. And that gives me 28/11, which can be reduced down to 2 and 6/11. All right. What I would like for you to do now is go ahead and complete number 4, and then go ahead and complete the rest of these questions by yourself. And then if you have any questions or comments, leave them at the bottom of the video, and I will see you guys tomorrow in class.